You didn't kiss anyone. You didn't sneak out or download an app or book a hotel room. But something shifted, and you felt it before you could name it. A conversation you looked forward to a little too much, a name you mentioned a little too carefully, a version of yourself you only seemed to be around someone who wasn't your partner. This video isn't about catching anyone. It's about understanding something most people never get honest with themselves about. Because the forms of emotional cheating that do the most damage are the ones that never look like cheating at all. A large-scale study on infidelity, one that surveyed nearly 95,000 people, found something that surprises a lot of people. Women were significantly more likely than men to have engaged in emotional affairs rather than physical ones. And women were also more likely to say that emotional infidelity caused them more pain than the physical kind. That distinction matters, because when we hear the word cheating, we almost always picture something physical. A kiss behind a closed door, a secret meeting, a lie about where someone was last night. But emotional cheating doesn't announce itself like that. It builds slowly in the space between what you say out loud and what you keep to yourself. It starts with comfort, not betrayal. And that's exactly why it's so easy to miss and so difficult to admit once you see it. What follows are 5 forms of emotional cheating that rarely get called what they are. And if you're honest with yourself, you might recognize more than one. The first is something you might call the emotional download. You have a bad day. Something happens at work, or your family says something that gets under your skin, or you just feel off in a way you can't quite explain. And instead of turning to your partner, you text someone else. Not because your partner wouldn't listen, but because this other person just gets it faster. They don't need the backstory. They don't ask the wrong follow-up question. They just understand. And so over time, without ever making a conscious decision, you start routing your emotional world through someone else. Psychologists call this emotional disclosure, and it's one of the primary building blocks of intimacy. When you consistently share your fears, your frustrations, your private inner world with someone, you are building a bond with them. That's not a theory. That's how attachment works. The problem isn't that you talk to a friend about your day. The problem is when that friend becomes your first call, your default confidant, the person who holds the version of you that your partner used to hold. And your partner doesn't even know it's happening because from the outside, nothing has changed. You still come home. You still ask about dinner. You still sleep in the same bed. But the intimacy has quietly been rerouted, and your partner is left with a version of closeness that's been hollowed out from the inside. You might tell yourself it's just friendship, and maybe it is. But here's the question worth sitting with. If your partner could read every message, hear every conversation, would they feel fine about it? Or would they feel like a stranger in their own relationship? The second form never leaves your head. You never say it out loud. You never act on it, but it's there, running quietly in the background like software you forgot you installed. The mental comparison. Your partner tells a story at a dinner party and you think about how someone else would have told it better. Your partner offers comfort after a hard week, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you're comparing it to the way someone else once made you feel. This is the form of emotional cheating that people dismiss the fastest, because it's private, it's internal, you haven't done anything. But what you've done is build an invisible scorecard and your partner is losing a game they don't even know they're playing. Research on relationship satisfaction consistently shows that idealized alternatives are one of the strongest predictors of relationship decline. When you mentally elevate someone else, even someone you barely know, into the role of what could be, you're not just daydreaming. You're actively eroding your investment in what already is. And the cruelest part is that your partner often feels it without understanding it. They sense the distance, they notice the slight irritation, the way you sigh when they do something that never used to bother you. They start trying harder, or they stop trying altogether. And neither response fixes anything, because the real issue was never about them. It was about the story you started telling yourself when you weren't paying attention. You didn't cheat, but you quietly withdrew your full attention from the person who thought they had it. And in a long-term relationship, attention is the currency. When you spend it somewhere else, even silently, the account runs dry. The third form is the one that's hardest to catch in the act, the digital slow burn. It starts with something small, a reaction to a story, a reply to a post, a comment on a photo that was a little more personal than it needed to be. And then it becomes a rhythm. You check if they've posted, you notice when they haven't. You find yourself composing a message in your head before you even open the app. Divorce attorney James Sexton once referred to social media as a cheating machine, and the data supports him. Platforms designed to reward engagement and connection make it remarkably easy to build intimacy with someone you've never even met in person. You're not sneaking around. You're just liking things, replying to things, being friendly. But somewhere along the way, the algorithm of your own attention shifted. You started curating your online presence for someone specific. You started checking your phone not for news or entertainment, but for one name, one notification, one small signal that they were thinking about you too. Researchers at the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy have pointed out that when you include emotional affairs alongside physical ones, the number of people who have been unfaithful in their marriages rises dramatically. For men, the figure climbs to nearly 45%. For women, roughly 35%. And a significant portion of those emotional affairs didn't begin in hotel rooms or at office parties. They began on a screen in the quiet, while their partner was in the next room. The thing about the digital slow burn is that it gives you deniability at every stage. You never crossed a line because the line kept moving. Each step felt harmless on its own. But if you stacked every late-night reply, every inside joke, every moment you chose their notification over your partner's voice, it would tell a story. And it wouldn't be a story about friendship. You know it's crossed a line when you start deleting. Not because anything was explicit, but because the volume of it, the frequency, the tone, would raise a question you're not ready to answer. The fourth form catches people off guard because it doesn't feel like it's about anyone new. It's about someone old. The nostalgia door. You weren't looking for them. Maybe they showed up in a people you may know suggestion. Maybe they texted you on your birthday out of nowhere. Maybe you ran into them at a grocery store and it all came flooding back. The way they laughed. The way they made you feel at 22. Reconnecting with an ex or with anyone who once held a romantic place in your life is one of the most commonly underestimated forms of emotional cheating. Because it comes preloaded with something no new connection can offer: history, shared memory, a version of you that existed before the mortgage, before the kids, before the weight of adult responsibility reshaped the person you became. And that's exactly what makes it so intoxicating. You're not falling for who they are now, you're falling for who you were then. The nostalgia isn't really about the other person, it's about a feeling you lost access to somewhere along the way. But to your partner, the distinction doesn't matter. Because whether you're drawn to a person or drawn to a memory, you've opened a door that leads away from the relationship you're in, and every time you walk through it, even just to look around, you come back a little less present. People often justify this by saying it's just catching up. And maybe for the first conversation, it is. But you know it's become something else when you start editing what you tell your partner about it. When "we texted a bit" actually means you talked for 2 hours. When "just an old friend" comes with a history you're deliberately leaving out. The lie isn't in the words. It's in the omission. An omission in a relationship built on trust is a form of erosion that's slow enough to ignore and steady enough to cause real damage. The fifth form hides in plain sight because it has a name that everyone uses casually, almost affectionately. The work spouse. The person at your job who you eat lunch with every day, the one who knows about the annoying client, the impossible deadline, the coworker you can't stand. They know what kind of coffee you drink. They know when you're having a bad morning before you say a word. And your actual partner? They hear about work in broad strokes. It was fine, same old stuff. Kind of stressful. Meanwhile, someone else is getting the full version. The specifics, the emotions. the unfiltered you. The workplace is still the most common environment where affairs begin. And it's not because offices are full of temptation, it's because they're full of shared experience. You spend 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours a day alongside someone. You face the same pressures. You celebrate the same wins. You build an emotional vocabulary that belongs only to the two of you. Your partner can't compete with that, and they shouldn't have to. But the emotional architecture of a work-spouse relationship often mirrors a romantic one in every way except the physical. You confide in them. You look forward to seeing them. You feel a specific kind of disappointment on the days they're not around. And the test is the same as it was for every other form on this list. If your partner could see the full picture, every lingering conversation in the break room, every private joke in the group chat, every moment where this person made you feel more seen than the person you go home to, would your partner feel like they're still your person? Or would they feel replaced by someone who just happens to share your commute? Not one of these 5 forms involves a physical act. They wouldn't hold up in court, and they don't come with the dramatic reveal that movies have trained us to associate with infidelity. But they all share one thing. They redirect emotional energy that once belonged inside your relationship to somewhere or someone outside of it. And over time, that redirection doesn't just create distance. It rewrites the terms of the relationship in a way that only one person agreed to. This isn't about guilt. And it's not about policing your friendships or living in constant surveillance of your own thoughts. It's about something quieter than that. It's about noticing when you've started giving the best parts of yourself to someone who isn't the person you promised them to. Because emotional cheating doesn't start with a decision. It starts with a silence. The things you stopped saying to your partner, the feelings you started keeping to yourself, and eventually the version of yourself that someone else got to know better than the person lying next to you. If anything in this video felt familiar, it might be worth sitting with that for a moment. Not with judgment, just with honesty. If this hit close to home, you might want to watch this next video, where we look at why emotionally intelligent people often struggle the most in relationships. It's on screen now. And if you made it to the end of this one, subscribing means you won't miss what's coming next.